How did China go from a backward, war-torn country to the world's second largest economy with many cutting-edge technologies? China has the world talking since last year, from TikTok refugees migrating to a Chinese app called Xiaohongshu, and many US users rather learn Chinese than using their domestic social networks. To earlier this year, DeepSeek, a Chinese AI company, developed a much better AI technology with much lower cost, made it open source for everyone to use, and totally destroyed some countries' plan to build technology monopoly. And recently, a Chinese film also made history. For example, this China-made animation film Ne Zha 2. It is the first non-Hollywood movie made into the all-time global top 20 of highest grossing movie. And Ne Zha 2 also becomes the first animated film ever to cross $2 billion globally. China made so many records breakthroughs recently. And even more interesting, recently, in response to the US tariffs and hostilities, China's foreign ministry replied with a strong message. China says, if war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we are ready to fight to the end. It's very rare to see such a blunt, straightforward, and strong message from Chinese officials, but that shows China is not afraid of coercion or bullying. China is confident. If you want war, bring it on. So what made China so confident? And what's the secret to China's success? How did China do it? In this video, I will try to break it down to you. Hello everyone, I'm Li Jingjing. Born and raised in China, I have been working as a journalist in China for the past 10 years, covering politics and international relations. China's top priority has always been Chinese people. China's top priority is never about starting a war or confronting the US or surpass US. China's top priority is providing better life for Chinese people. So, investing in common prosperity. You know what's the biggest change in the past 40 years in China? The biggest change wasn't in the technology industry or culture industry or movie industry like I mentioned in the beginning of this video. The biggest change happened in China's rural areas. I can use my personal stories. 30 years ago, when I was a kid, I was malnourished because my parents didn't have enough food with enough protein to feed me. Now look at me. I'm a little bit overnourished, but many kids like me in this generation, our life changed so much. The biggest change in China in the past 30 to 40 years probably is one, infrastructure. In the past 40 years, railways, high-speed rails, highways reached to every corner of this country, every villages. Some highways, some railways connected the deepest village in deep mountain. Sometimes the highway reached to some villagers' household, to their door, so they can bring fruits, tangerines, the agricultural products they grow from their backyard. If you travel to Xizang, like I did as a reporter in the past few years, you will notice even deep in the mountain, even just this one nomad's house is connected with affordable electricity. It's connected with 5G service, water. Wherever you go in China, even in the villages, farmers can access these basic necessities with a very affordable price. So this is the biggest changes in China. In the past 40 years, China lifted 800 million people out of extreme poverty. China accounts for 75% of global extreme poverty reduction. So whether a country is successful or not, it's not determined by how many billionaires it has, how many oligarchs it has. Whether a country is truly successful is determined by whether the fruits of development can be shared by the entire population in this country. It's determined whether the least privileged people can have a dignified life. And what China has been doing in the past few decades is to make sure everyone in this country can have a dignified life. This week, I've been covering China's annual most important political meeting, the Two Sessions. And this is the meeting that this country sets yearly goals. You know what's China's top priority this year? Developing economy, developing technology, building military. Of course, these areas are important, but the number one priority for China has always been, we call it 三农, which is agriculture, rural areas, and farmers. That has been the top priority of China for the past few decades. You know why? Why it's important? First, it's so important to develop a country's agriculture because a country needs to have its food sovereignty. I cannot stress this enough. How many countries have lost its food sovereignty? Many countries who used to able to feed themselves with very fertile lands, but because of neoliberalism, capitalism, which designs to destroy their abilities to feed themselves, they lost their food sovereignty because they use their land to plant things that are catering to rich people in developed countries but destroy the fertility of their lands. So you lost your food security, you lost your food sovereignty. But China has been very clear. The food bowl of Chinese people need to be held by Chinese people. We need to have our food sovereignty. So agriculture is very important. And many people from different countries have been telling me they are so surprised that the food are so delicious, so fresh, well, so cheap in China. So the government has been focusing on providing quality, quantity, and a variety of food for its 1.4 billion population. Second, developing rural regions. China is a vast country, and the majority of this country is rural regions. So China focusing on revitalizing rural regions to make sure those who are lifted out of extreme poverty will never go back to poverty. Revitalize the rural areas, make it a beautiful, talented, interesting place to attract young talents, go back to their hometown, develop their hometown. Third, improving farmers' living standards. This year, China continued to focus on how to make sure all the farmers can live a dignified life, how to make it easier for them to integrate with the cities, also make sure they still have their own land, their own houses in their villages. Yes, in the past 3 to 4 decades, China made economic miracles, made great achievements, but China has been very clear, pointing it out the problem it is still facing, which is the unbalanced development, and China is dedicated in solving this problem. Reduce the wealth gap. Reduce the wealth gap between people, also reduce the wealth gap between regions. So back to our original question, what's the secret of China's success? How did China make it? First, investing in your people, investing in common prosperity. Make sure the least privileged people in your country can have a dignified life. Make sure the few rich people don't dictate your policies. Make sure the fruits of development can be shared by the entire society. And this is what China has been doing in the past decades. To conclude, I will use the transformation of the city Chongqing as an example, and I hope you like it. This happens when a country invests in development, not wars. Look at the city Chongqing in southwest China. 30 years ago, it looked like this. Now, it looks like this. Now Chongqing is one of the most popular cities for global tourists.
This is the center of Chongqing.
I came to Chongqing to light up my life.
And I can name a dozen and hundreds of cities in China that went through the same transformation. So invest in common prosperity, baby.